Do you ever feel absolutely furious at the entire world? Do you ever look at everything around you and find yourself filled with unyielding rage, knowing things shouldn't be this way? Well, do I have a book recommendation for you? Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Book Guy, and today we're talking about the Iron Widow series by Xiran Jay Zhao. These two young adult-ish books are a retelling of the real-life story of the sole Empress of China, Zetien, who ruled during the 6th century. But her story is now reimagined in an epic sci-fi setting where people fire ki blasts and drive giant mech monsters and fight hordes of aliens. But the real enemy is the patriarchy. This series is amazing. Today's video is part of a monthly theme. We've been celebrating Pride Month all this June and looking at queer books, and that's exactly what we have today. A very LGBT-friendly series that takes a confronting look at systematic oppression of minorities, especially women. This is very feminist literature, and it is full of rage.
I think the world needs a lot of more young, angry women, to be honest.
You should also know just how well written these books are. This series was famously nominated for the prestigious Hugo Award, but controversially rejected. It was later revealed in leaked emails that the Chinese government literally blocked this series because they deemed it too critical of Chinese culture. So the author, Xiran, loves to boldly call themselves the Hugo Award disqualified author. Yes, this is a series that defies systems of oppression in story and in reality. A quick note before we begin, this series uses Chinese names with proper Chinese pronunciations. I'm going to do my best today, but I'm just a dumb monolingual Australian. Thankfully, the author themselves provided a pronunciation guide on their Instagram, so I'm going to put clips of their guide here. For example, the protagonist is Zetien. It's actually pronounced Zetien. So there you go. Now let's take a look at this series and see if it's going to be something that you might like to read. The people of Huaxia are at war with an invading alien species, the Hundun. The aliens devastated the human population when they arrived 200 years ago, causing a near apocalypse. Since then, humans have been able to scavenge the body of the Hunduns and use them to build giant mech warriors known as the chrysalises. The pilots of these giant suits are the legendary heroes of humanity. Except, these suits exact a heavy toll. They absorb spirit pressure, or ki, from a person's soul. If they use too much in battle, the pilot dies. That's why every male pilot has a concubine, a female co-pilot who is little more than a battery to be drained of life to fuel the war machine. All pilots are male, or co-pilots are female. Zetien does not accept this. Her sister died to one of these pilots in what we're told is a glorious, noble sacrifice, but she thinks this is bullshit. Why are all the men who casually throw away women's lives treated like celebrities just because it's war? That doesn't make it right. So Zetien plans to shake up the system. She's going to find the man responsible for her sister's death, and she's going to get her revenge. Alright, let's address the elephant in the room. We have seen some of these fantasy concepts before. The humans have ki energy like Dragon Ball Z. They drive massive mech like Neon Genesis Evangelion or Pacific Rim. In fact, the mech suits or chrysalises are like animals, like the nine-tailed fox or the tortoise, for example. So you could be extra unflattering in your description and call this Dragon Ball Z with furries. And they have fights against other giants, so it's like Attack on Titan. I would say with furries, but Attack on Titan already had that. Now, I know I say this all the time,
and you'll hear it again!
But people get really judgmental when fantasy and sci-fi stories are even slightly similar to other fantasy sci-fi concepts. But I think it's a great idea to reuse some old concepts in new and exciting ways. We've seen dragon riding before, But I want more dragon riding stories. We've seen computer simulation stories, let's have a few more. Story concepts are a lot like music. It's easy for some notes to overlap between pieces, and each artist plays each piece differently. Who doesn't love musical covers? The great thing about fantasy and sci-fi is that there are infinite possibilities for creativity, so why shouldn't we use them all a couple of times? So Iron Widow does take some familiar concepts, but reuses them in completely different ways and in interesting ways. Let's discuss how. This is a futuristic sci-fi book that draws heavily from ancient Chinese culture, but it focuses especially on the brutal treatment of women. As an example, we see harsh beauty standards that are impossible to live up to, such as the ancient custom of foot binding. Zetien is literally a cripple. Her feet were broken when she was 5 or 6-ish, very young, and her feet are now kept bound so they don't grow too big. She often has to travel by wheelchair because walking is painful. Her parents literally crippled her. Also, her parents often make her starve herself so she doesn't gain weight around the belly. Also, she can marry a rich man one day and earn her family lots of money. She's like a lamb being prepared for the slaughter. And we'll talk more about the treatment of women again later. Also, all the names in the series are intensely Chinese, like unapologetically so. They're not even names that are slightly easy for English speakers to pronounce, it's straight up punishing. Let's look at the two main characters. So this guy, you might pronounce it as Li Shimin. It's Li Shumin, even with the inflection going down and then up. Shumin.
Li Shimin.
And this guy, oh man, you might pronounce it as maybe Yeezy. No, it's Yizhu. I swear, the biggest plot twist of the book was just hearing this guy's name said correctly. Now, of course, you can pronounce these however you want. Just read the book. It's really fine. But this is one of the reasons why I got very interested in this book and read it and listened to it at the same time, because I got very invested in trying to pronounce everything correctly. It didn't help, but this world also has modern technology, so things like tablets, phones, drones, and social media. And it's not just for aesthetic. The book confronts the topics of government propaganda and the control of information and censorship and disqualifying authors from the Hugo Awards, although that's not in the story itself. But onto the bigger cool stuff. Each chrysalis is completely unique. So the chrysalises all have 3 forms, each with a corresponding power level. It requires a huge amount of spirit pressure to transform, so the higher forms are a last resort, since it usually means killing the co-pilot to achieve it. But once they've reached the highest power level, they can smash through whole buildings or fire massive ki blasts that destroy whole mountains. They are the only force that can hold back the alien horde. The great enemy, the Hundun, comes straight out of Chinese mythology. In myth, they are these faceless winged creatures that you may have seen before, such as in Marvel's Shang-Chi. But in Iron Widow, they're reimagined as rather terrifying, crawling, scuttling monsters with multiple legs that swarm over townspeople and chrysalises alike. Some even come in giant forms that really challenge the human pilots in epic Power Rangers battles. But enough about world building, let's look at the people and their stories. Our main character is Zetien, and the story is told in first-person mode from her point of view. Much of this story focuses on her. Zetien is a rather aggressive character. She's extremely tough and never takes crap from people. She stands up for herself and speaks her mind, but she's also so much more than just another angry character. Getting off topic, but there is a trend to create strong characters who appear tough and brave, but are really just rude and bullies and borderline abusive to everyone they meet. And this can be mistaken for a sign of empowerment. I'm tempted to give examples, but I don't want to start a fight here. Yet I felt like Zetien does not fall into that trap. She is respectful to others, just until they disrespect her. Then she throws down. It's an important distinction, because this means she doesn't come across as just lacking self-control. Her rage has genuine justification, and it's matched by her maturity. Her rage is focused, and she knows when to bite her tongue and wait to get vengeance later. Another impressive piece of writing is that Zetien is uneducated. She's a commoner, and it rings true. There's a common problem in writing because, let's face it, most writers writers are educated, aren't they? Writers usually have a college-level education and a mastery of language, so when they try to write an uneducated character, it can be very hard for them to do it realistically. But Zetien actually has huge gaps in her knowledge and isn't always very articulate. I was very impressed by the authenticity of this detail. Next, Gao Yizhu is our rich nerd character. The guy was born into privilege with all the wealth and education available to him. He genuinely thinks he's a good person and he means well, but he has very little idea of just how difficult life is for the poor of Huaxia. Yet Yizhu is also bloody tough, and when he needs to fight, he fights smart and ruthlessly. Yizhu grows so much, and in many ways, he became my favorite character. And one more highlight is Li Shumin. He's the strongest pilot in the fleet and has the highest rate of death among his co-pilots. He's a former serial killer who was on death row until his incredible spirit pressure was discovered and he became a pilot instead. He's the only pilot who was not celebrated and adored, but rather feared. What darkness lives within his heart? There is some excellent character writing among the villains here. Or should I say antagonists rather than villains? There are many characters who stand in Zetien's way who are not exactly evil. They have their own agenda, their own moral codes. They are the heroes in their own story, and that's what makes them so compelling. As you can probably tell, all of these characters are flawed in multiple ways. The story actually has a lot in common with Game of Thrones, where the world is not divided by good and evil people. People are nuanced and complicated. Our heroes don't always do what's right, and our villains aren't always evil. I love seeing this level of moral ambiguity in a young adult setting. Welcome to the real world, kids. Yeah, there's a reason why Xiran is friends with George Martin in real life. They write stories with similar depictions of humanity and with damn good villains. This was a very strange series from a plot perspective, and I'll keep it vague and brief here, but I never knew what was going to happen next. This story went through so many rapid, sudden changes in direction. It was thrilling and exciting. I think it can also be a little disorientating at times. You see, most books that struggle with pacing issues are usually too slow, and that's why the pacing feels off. These books might actually be slightly too fast. Think of book one as a non-stop action movie, because it really is relentless. But I'll say for book one that the plot focuses on piloting these giant mech warriors. But as I said, the real enemy is patriarchy. While everyone else is focused on war, Zetien is more focused on getting justice for women and ending their sacrifices. In many ways, this is a story about feminism. There are many stories that focus on female empowerment, but really just give women a giant 50-meter tall suit of armor that fires energy blasts. And that's all well and good. But other stories, on the other hand, will take a hard, confronting look at just how bad misogyny can be. This series is all about power structures that are designed to limit a woman's rights. This isn't individual misogyny, such as one bad dude who mistreats his wife in an isolated incident, because individual misogyny is very easy to recognize and much easier to fix. Instead, this is widespread systemic misogyny on a cultural and societal level, and it's much more insidious. Wu Zetien lives in a world where women have their feet broken and bound, where they are crippled for beauty, and they are told how lucky they are. It has serious Handmaid's Tale vibes.
You are so lucky!
How can you explain to people that this is wrong and barbaric when the belief is so ingrained into the public consciousness? This series attempts to answer the question, how do we fix this? What can we actually do to fix social inequality? What strategies will work and what won't work? Should we use acts of violence, government orders, or will changing laws, bold speeches, or social media campaigns make a difference? The overwhelming truth is, it's hard. And it's complicated, and there's a huge number of really stupid people who will get in the way. There's a very important note from the author at the start and end of Heavenly Tyrant, which I feel the need to share here. At the start, it says that the beliefs of the characters are not the beliefs of the authors. This is an important note because Zetien and her allies make some questionable choices in the pursuit of equality, and at the end of the book, the acknowledgements state that the book is not exactly how change works. The author says, in our reality, the only way to enact change on a mass scale has been and will always be to get out and get organized. Unionize, talk to your community, join organizations, protest. And don't be fooled into resenting women, people of colour, queer people, immigrants, or other groups of people that seem to be cared more about nowadays but don't actually hold the bulk of power in society. So just remember, folks, this story is talking about real issues, but it's still a work of fiction. This is not a textbook on feminist reform, it's not a guidebook, but it's still an excellent discussion on these very important themes, looking at what to do and maybe what not to do. Hopefully, it'll get you thinking in new ways and ultimately leave you feeling inspired. Alright, let's focus on book 2 for a moment and talk about what makes it different. This book is a fair bit longer and more mature. You might say that book 1 is hard young adult, but book 2 is adult. But we'll come back to that. Now, I can't say much about the premise of book 2 because a lot happens in book 1, but the story is not just about piloting mech suits anymore, it's about leadership, and to an extent, governance. We sometimes think that if the right person became president, then all of our problems would go away and we'd fix sexism. But that's not how the world works, and holding power doesn't guarantee success. The real challenge comes in changing people's minds, and that's a lot trickier. But there's 2 other plot lines in this book. The first is court intrigue. This is literally a Game of Thrones situation, where all the powerful ruling elite are vying for control, trying to manipulate and outsmart their opponents in a constant battle for power and dominance. And the second plot line is the secrets of this world. There are mysteries surrounding the Hundun, the chrysalises, and the gods themselves, and all these mysteries are just dying to be revealed. This book is more fantasy and more sci-fi than ever. Yet this second book is clearly more mature than the first, which begs the important question... Let's face it, young adult has always been a vague genre. It's often considered as books for teenagers, and yet teenagers change a lot during this period of life. And content that's appropriate for a 13-year-old is inappropriate for a 19-year-old, and vice versa for different reasons. But one of the biggest problems with YA is the disproportionate number of male to female authors, and the fact that YA is a lot like the Hotel California, and once you check in, you can never leave. The author Xiran has told their story publicly a few times, and I recommend watching this reel on their Instagram where they tell the story at length. But the short version is that they wrote Iron Widow and sent it to all the agents and publishers as both adult and young adult, depending on what the receiver was looking for. That's just a good strategy, by the way. When Xiran got their offer, it was to publish Iron Widow as a young adult series, so they did an edit of the whole book specifically to make it more YA. But to a certain extent, they had to do it, because it was the only way to get published. When they started writing book 2, they realized they didn't want the story to be YA anymore. Yet publishers don't like it if you try to leave the box they put you in. They don't like it if you age up your story. The other issue is gender, which is kind of on theme for today. There is a significant push for female authors to go into the YA genre, whether their work suits it or not. Now, accurate statistics on this are strangely hard to come by, so if you've got hard data, please share it, but I've got 2 examples. One is from The Guardian, who did a study between 2006 and 2016. Young adult authors were 59% white female and 31% white male, with a much smaller number of authors who were people of colour. A more recent example is from 2020. In the first half of 2020, 78% of young adult books were written by women, 12% by men, and 9% by non-binary authors. That's an overwhelming majority. Although, for important context, that same study showed that in general adult fantasy, we have 58% written by women and 38% by men. So what does this mean? Well, for one, women are writing and publishing more books just across the board. Women are reading more than men too, which is probably a good topic for its own video. But there is also significantly more women in YA. I think we could argue that women are more successful when they publish in YA, since many of the big names in adult fantasy are still male. These trends mean that a lot of authors like Xiran are publishing books that don't quite fit the YA genre. I personally agree that book 1 is YA, but book 2 is not. It's darker, it's more mature, and there's a little bit more smut. So what do we do as readers? Do we just sit back and blame the industry for its mistakes? mistakes? No, the solution is to get out and read stories that are written by people different to us, and read stories that are about people different to us. For example, I'm a white adult male, but I read books with teenage Asian girls in the lead because they're good books, but also because that's how I expand my worldview and learn about different people. So many readers only read books if the author looks like them and if the main character looks like them too. But reading about different people is how we learn to empathize with people who are not like us. The YA genre is geared towards women because women are actually buying and reading it. If we want to expand that genre, we need to get more people from different demographics reading it. If we want to see more teenage boys reading YA, then we need to see more adult men reading and writing YA. That would actually lead to more diverse stories within the genre. But at the same time, we should also read women who do get published as adult fantasy to show that that's a legitimate option to earn book sales. That's my suggestion, and once again, I'm sure it's more complicated than I think. But let's move on and talk about just how queer this series is. There's a lot of bisexual characters here, people who are attracted to more than one gender. In fact, just assume everyone is bi. And if you meet a homophobic character, trust me, they're bi too, but mad about it. This is a common trend in queer fiction for a story to give greater focus and emphasis to one branch of the LGBT community. So looking at other series we've covered this month, Priory of the Orange Tree does have an assortment of queer characters, but with a special focus on sapphic relationships. Gideon the Ninth has a focus on lesbian characters. Well, in Iron Widow, the focus is bisexual. And that focus is okay, by the way. Discussing bisexuality is an important topic, because even in the queer community, we sometimes encounter something known as bi-erasure, where people claim
there's no such thing as being bisexual.
People might say, oh, you're in a relationship with someone of the opposite gender, you're straight. Oh, you're in a relationship with the same gender, you're gay. And there's no allowance for the possibility of bi-attraction. Ask me how I know. This series also discusses polyamory. We have characters with multiple romantic and sexual partners in ethical, consensual relationships. In fact, when they all come together, it's called a polycule. Now we have bisexual characters who actually have multiple partners from different genders. Are they bi enough for you now? Polyamory is a topic that is becoming more widely known, but still struggling to gain acceptance. Poly relationships don't grant many legal rights, if any. Many people consider all forms of non-monogamy to just be another form of lying, cheating, and abuse. But ethical non-monogamy, with the emphasis on ethical, can be a beautiful form of love, built on trust, respect, and wanting those you love to be happy. Iron Widow shows polyamory as simply sharing love between multiple people, and it shows that love shared is not weakened, it's multiplied. It's a genuinely healthy depiction of a topic we don't see very much of in fiction. As for the content warning, okay, here's the truth. There is not that much of a content warning here. It's pretty tame. But people have freaked out because there is the tiniest bit of sex and violence in a book that's for teenagers. And readers have exaggerated its content warning to overhyped levels. I feel like this happens every time. But to be specific, there's a lot of action violence of shooting key blasts and smashing mech warriors. There's some stabbing and choking, and technically there are some war crimes and murder of civilians. Okay, maybe there is some stuff to freak out about. The smut that I mentioned earlier is actually very light. There is a lot of hype around this being a smut series, but it's mostly just the controversy. In truth, there are barely any sex scenes, and they're very short and very vague. Although there is one scene in the second book that's just slightly kinky. And I know some people who've read it might be like, well, hang on, that scene was more than slightly kinky. What's the book guy into? Pfft, come on, it's slight. It's beginner's level stuff. Anyway, the real content warning is about the mature themes, because there's a lot of them. There are characters starving themselves and self-harming in the name of chasing beauty standards. There's abusive family, coercive control, gaslighting, manipulation, and reproductive coercion, and loss of body autonomy. There's a lot of discussions around sexual assault, so that sort of thing. Is the ending worth it? So this series is not finished, and we don't know how many books there will be. All we know at this stage is that there will be at least 3. But many fans, myself included, are skeptical that we could possibly wrap up everything that's unresolved at this point with just one more book. There's so much that's left open at the end of book 2. I think this will be more than 3, but we'll see. But at this stage, I think both of these are great books. Just remember that Iron Widow is more YA and A Heavenly Tyrant is more adult, which also kind of answers the question of how much should you try? I honestly think that Iron Widow is a crowd-pleasing book that most people will like. Although, if you do have some doubt after reading it, consider reading book 2 as well, since it ages up the series. The more mature story might be more your style. So that's all I have to say about that. I hope you'll give this series a try. Good luck and happy reading. Thanks for watching. Now, make sure you subscribe for more book deep dives like this one, and check out a bunch of the other videos on my channel. Also, please consider supporting my work. I have my own books, The Immortal Investigations. I have an online shop where you can buy some merch, and a Patreon where you can chat with me and vote on my content. I'll be back very soon for some more book recommendations. Until then, take care of yourselves, and I hope you enjoy a good book today. Bye.